Good morning and welcome to the second community consultation event for the former Wisley Airfield. My name is Andonis Pazaru and I'm the Community and Green Infrastructure Project Manager. I work for Taylor Wimpey and I'll be your chair this morning. So how will this session work? The session will last approximately 2 hours. At about 11:30, there will be an opportunity for a question and answers session. Please do submit your questions via the Q&A button that is found on your screen, and we'll endeavour to answer as many of those questions this morning. Please be rest assured, however, if your questions aren't answered this morning, we will be uploading a full Q&A document by the 27th of November, so on Friday, where myself and the rest of the team will respond to those questions. Please note that the session this morning will be recorded, as it's very much our intention to upload these recordings onto our website, which is www.wisleyairfield.com, to ensure that you have the information available when hopefully you spend the time to kindly provide us with the feedback following the session. So what will you see this morning? So this online consultation event represents a key part of our second chapter of engagement for the former Wisley Airfield. We will be providing you with an initial draft, we'll be providing you with an overview of the initial draft master plan following the events in July of this year. We'll also be showing you how we have responded and evolved the emerging master plan over the course of the last few months. And as I mentioned, at about 11:30, we'll have a Q&A session. Please note we will be hosting another series of online consultation events early next year before we submit an outline application for the site in the second quarter of 2021. So that's by the summer of next year. So these are a list of all the key discussion topics we will be discussing this morning. So if I can take this opportunity to hand you over to Lee Davis, our Technical Director. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Antonis. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your time today. As mentioned by Antonis, my name is Lee Davis. I am the Technical Director at Taylor Wimpey Major Developments and the Project Director for this proposed development. We are one of the largest residential developers in the UK, building over 15,000 homes every year. As well as homes, we provide green spaces, infrastructure, including schools, community facilities, and local amenities to benefit both new and existing communities. We're a responsible developer and want to create great places for people to live, work, and enjoy. To achieve this, we're committed to working together with the existing communities and local authorities to create exciting, sustainable developments. Our sites are not just about housing, but investment into the existing and new community. We are very proud to say that last year, we, Taylor Wimpey, invested over £445 million in local communities to fund improvements and build new facilities. Joining me on the former Wisley Airfield project are an experienced and dedicated Taylor Wimpey team, including Antonis, who you heard from earlier, who was our Community and Green Infrastructure Project Manager, Camille Saw, our Planning Manager, and James Newton, also a Planning Manager, who's not presenting today. I'm also pleased to advise that we've partnered with Vivid Housing Group to deliver 40% of the much needed affordable housing in the area. May I introduce you to John Waterfield from Vivid Homes.
Yes, morning. Thank you, Lee. Yes, we're really excited to be working with TW on this scheme. I'd just like to give you a little bit of background to Vivid. Well, Vivid is a medium-sized housing association providing housing for people in housing need. Our vision is to provide more homes and bright futures by helping our customers improve their life chances and their well-being. We're a leading provider of affordable homes and housing related services and support to about 70,000 customers in the south of England. We have about 31,000 homes spanning Hampshire, Surrey, Berkshire, and expanding now into West Sussex. We're planning to build about 17,000 homes over the next 10 years, which is very ambitious, and over 1,200 of these homes over the next year alone. So that's a quick background to Vivid, and I'd like to hand you back now to Antonis. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, John. The Taylor Wimpey's consultant team, who you see on this slide, have been working very hard over the last few months to put together options and proposals for your consideration and input. And we'll be happy to accept questions later after the presentation. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning. And let me have your feedback later on in the presentation. Let me hand you over to Antonis. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, John. We're now going to run through the site context quickly. So I'll hand you over to Camille Saw, our planning manager.
Many thanks, Adonis, and good morning, everyone. This is our master plan boundary, which many of you will be familiar with. It reflects the boundary of policy A35 and includes additional land owned by Taylor Wimpey to the north. The land in the blue and pink is represented by CBRE and Hallam respectively. We have a landowner working group with both parties to ensure the master plan is developed as a cohesive whole. This is our vision, working together to deliver our sustainable community. But what does it mean? It means we are working to communicate, engage, and consult with you all in an open and transparent manner. This includes working with our delivery partner Vivid, who you heard from earlier, Guildford Borough Council, Surrey County Council, you as residents, the wider community and stakeholders. We are pushing to be as truly sustainable as we can from the perspective of climate change, biodiversity, transport, and health and well-being. We want to bring this all together to deliver a new community which is centred around placemaking. It's forward-thinking, has a strong legacy, and is exemplar. By doing so, we aim to provide benefits to and integrate with the existing community surrounding the site. Setting the planning policy baseline for us is the adopted local plan, as well as the emerging Lovelace neighbourhood plan and supporting supplementary planning guidance, which includes the Strategic Development Framework, SPD. As set out in our first public consultation, the adopted local plan sets the principle of development on this site through policy A35, which seeks to deliver approximately 2,000 homes and approximately 100 extra care units on the site and a suite of supporting non-residential uses. As set out previously, this will also include a large amount of open green space, which our team will touch on later. The delivery of non-residential uses will be included within an infrastructure delivery plan, a document we are currently working on. Its aim is to coordinate the intended infrastructure delivery on-site and off-site, as well as across all 3 land parcels included within policy A35. We will be working closely with all of our key stakeholders in the coordination of this document, including Guildford Borough Council, Surrey County Council, Highways England, and the CCG, to name a few. This document will then guide our Section 106 legal agreement and planning conditions if the development is approved. It will ensure the delivery of transport initiatives, education, healthcare, and open space. I know this is quite a complex subject, so I'm happy to take any questions on this during the Q&A. And I'll hand back over to Adonis. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. I'll just use this opportunity to take you all through the Chapter 1 consultation and indeed the planning and consultation timeline overview. So we've just concluded our Chapter 1 engagement. So that consisted of the first community consultation events in July of this year. We had our first design review panel in the summer, so in August. And as mentioned at the last community consultation event in the next step slides, we have now submitted our Stub Road and Enabling Works application. That was submitted in October, and Camille, no doubt, will give you a quick overview as to where we are with that shortly. We're now in Chapter 2, and that very much starts with this second community consultation event. And the aspiration in December is to have our second design review panel, where we will present the master plan that Graham will take you through shortly. Graham is our master plan architect. Before we then repeat this process again early next year, where we'll have our third community consultation event, January, February, followed by the third design review panel before we submit our outline application in the summer of 2021. So just a few key facts from the first consultation event, sort of setting the tone. We had 228 members of the community attend the last online consultation events, for which we had 47 online feedback forms. So thank you to all of those that provided that feedback. Subsequently, as of September, we had just under 3,000 unique visitors to our project website, which again is www.wisley-airfield.com, as well as continuing our ongoing conversations with the local stakeholders. So following the 47 online feedback forms that we received, we consulted on all of the items as seen on the column on the left. And from those 47, we took the preferred options and we overlaid them onto this diagram. And that really gave us a basis to work from. So again, thank you for all that feedback. So the first work in progress master plan, which hopefully you would have all seen either on our website or via the newsletters, which are circulated every month. We presented this framework plan at the August design review panel. Obviously, this plan has now been superseded, and as I mentioned, Graham will take you through as to where we are to date. In the August design review panel, which is a requirement for Taylor Wimpey, we presented the framework plan and we received written feedback based on the 6 design principles advocated by Guildford Borough Council. So these can be seen here 1 to 6 on the bottom left of the screen. In September, we received the meeting minutes from that design review panel. They have been uploaded onto our website again in the documents library. So please do feel free to review those at your leisure. However, these are a few of the key things that we took from that and will be working on moving forward. So really looking at the concept of a series of villages, looking at defining a richer sense of place and integrating with the community. So as I mentioned, please do review those meeting minutes, which can be found on our website. Furthermore, since July, we have now put together a community liaison group, and this consists of 14 local stakeholder groups. Indeed, I'm pleased to inform you that we have since received further interest and will be allowing further groups to join the stakeholder group, for which we discuss aspects of the site in a bit more detail. The group typically meets every 2 weeks, and please do feel free to go to our website and see the presentations that are presented in those meetings and the meeting minutes that follow those. Camille, is it okay if I hand back to you just to run through where we are in regards to the 2 applications, if I may?
Of course, yeah. As mentioned by Adonis earlier, we have now submitted our stub road and enabling works applications. These have both been registered and validated by the local council and are currently being consulted on by all internal and external consultees. We are closely monitoring the applications and any comments received on them. We are working with Guildford Borough Council and aim to have both applications decided in the first quarter of 2021. Thank you.
Thanks, Camille. Right, so I think there's a bit of we've had an introduction, a bit of an update as to what we've been working on. So if I hand over to Graham Kime, our master plan architect, he will be able to run through where we are with the latest master plan. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Adonis. And good morning. My name is Graham Kime. I'm a director of Gardner Stewart Architects, and we're working with Taylor Wimpey as the master planners for this new settlement. So at the last consultation event in July, we discussed a number of strategic ideas relating to this neighbourhood, including how we might break it down into 3 different villages. And we discussed the types of facilities that we would be providing on the site and asked you where you thought that those the best locations for those facilities would be. As Antonis has said, there was a high degree of agreement in the feedback, and this diagram shows the preferred locations together on one drawing, including some of the walk distances that feel quite comfortable in terms of our aims to encourage walking and cycling. So thank you for your thoughts on that. And this starts to give some shape to our new community. But of course, that's not design. A master plan's more than a response to a series of constraints and functions. It also has to create a place where people want to live and that can enrich their lives. So we're focusing on placemaking, on creating communities and on building connections. That's physical connections, but also social and community connections and visual connections. And our concept proposes a series of green lanes and village greens that are connected by a sustainable transport corridor. The new settlement will comprise 3 villages set in an extensive country park known as the Sang, and separated by wide swathes of green space, about 80 to 100 metres across. The village greens create a sense of arrival to each village and a focus for community life. Each green is located where connections come together to form a natural focus, where one of the green lanes, which are the primary north-south pedestrian and cycle routes, meets the sustainable transport corridor that connects the 3 villages. At a more detailed level, the master plan is a series of localized design responses, ideas that relate to a particular part of the site or integrate a particular function. So we pose questions and we identify design responses. So for example, how should we respond to the Stratford Brook and the wonderful woodland in that part of the site? Or how can we encourage people to walk or cycle to the shops? So this drawing is a cartoon of all of those ideas combined so that they interrelate and work together to reinforce the overall concept. So we'll now go on a journey of the site together. Let's assume we're arriving from the Ockham interchange by car or bus or by cycle. So this is the westernmost village closest to the A3. Number 1 is the proposed Wisley Lane diversion that, subject to final approval, is being built by Highways England as part of the A3 improvements. And that road will come off the Ockham interchange roundabout, it will pass through our site and go over the A3 to provide a new access to RHS Wisley. And as we come along Wisley Lane, we can glance across the open space through the woodland planting and the new rolling topography towards our development. Number 2 is about arrival. We propose to access our new settlement from this new road. And at this point, there is currently a row of mature trees, which was part of an historic hedgerow which crossed the site before the airfield was built. And our idea is to follow the line of this old hedgerow to create an arrival sequence. So firstly, we have some ponds and the mature trees that signal the turning, and then a pair of sentinel buildings that form a gateway. And then as you reach the village green, the arrival space, you crown the hill and you're greeted with a view across the Surrey Hills. And this view provides a connection to the wider context. It's part of the experience of the site that we'd like to retain. So we will open up this view in a number of locations. You may be wondering why we have some multicolored trees. Well, this road is also an entrance to RHS Wisley, and there's an opportunity to celebrate that. So in collaboration with RHS Wisley, perhaps we can create a sense of arrival through the planting of specimen trees like a linear arboretum. But that connection to Wisley is not just by road. We can also recognise that journey by foot or cycle as a horticultural trail at number 4. Again, specimen trees, but also foraging trails, allotments, feature planting and community growing areas. Number 5 shows the main sports pitches, which are on the former hangar site, partly because it's very flat, but also because it's sheltered by a tree belt and a change in level. And we'll be providing very high quality sports facilities for a range of sports, together with a pavilion that will provide changing as well as social and community functions. The Gypsy and Traveller site is also in this sheltered area, and we're providing 8 Gypsy and Traveller pitches as part of our site requirement. Number 6 shows the series of ponds that we're proposing as part of the sustainable drainage strategy. This is something we'll discuss later in the presentation, but water is a wonderful resource that can provide a whole range of benefits. And by providing ponds and swales, we can create a fantastic amenity for residents as well as important ecological habitat. Number 7 is our woodland walk. The Stratford Brook runs through a beautiful area of wet woodland that will become part of our accessible open space. And we're proposing to introduce a pedestrian path on a raised boardwalk, which can keep your feet dry even in wet conditions. And then continuing our journey, we'll rejoin the central corridor at number 8. And this is designed to promote the use of sustainable modes of transport. And again, we'll come to this a little later on. So summarising some of those ideas, the woodland walk with the raised boardwalk, the framed views across the Surrey Hills as we arrive into Village 1, and the horticultural trail on the route to RHS Wisley. So next we look at this, the central village, which is the largest of the 3 villages, and that's separated from Village 1 by a strategic green corridor shown at number 1. And this is about 100 metres wide, so it's a wide swathe of green space that creates a real separation. And this is another of those locations where you do get these incredible views over the tops of the trees looking towards the Surrey Hills. Numbers 2 and 3 show the village greens and the green lanes that we described earlier. And village Village 2 has 3 village greens, including the larger village park as part of the neighbourhood centre. And the village park is located where 5 different public rights of way all converge. So it really is a natural focus point. Perhaps there's an opportunity there for some public art where these things come together. Many of you who know the site will also recognise this row of poplar trees, which are an existing landscape feature and do help to frame some lovely views as well down towards the Stratford Brook. Number 4 is the neighbourhood centre, which of course is the heart of the whole community. And again, we'll discuss this later on. This contains a wide range of uses, including shops and cafes, employment and community buildings. And these would be arranged around a series of landscape spaces. And promoting the idea of multi-generational places, we've also located the senior living apartments in the neighbourhood centre as well. And they're close to the primary school, where there's an opportunity to engage in village life. And speaking of the school, number 5 is an all-through school, which would provide nursery, primary and secondary education on a single site. The primary school is then part of the community focus at the northern end of the neighbourhood centre. Secondary school provides a focus on one of the village greens. And along the southern edge is a dedicated pedestrian cycle route, which is car-free and therefore minimises conflict between vehicles and children and provides a convenient and safe route to school. We are in dialogue with the local education authority and discussing their emerging needs, so we'd be happy to answer any questions on the schools at the end. At number 6, Hatch Lane is retained as a rural lane with glimpsed views through to the pastoral landscape on the left, number 7, which is again retained as part of that country park. And here there will be low density and low rise housing looking onto this space. At the top of this slope, there's another opportunity to connect with those views across the hills and across this Arcadian landscape, number 7. And this might become a raised viewing platform next to the pond, or even a belvedere to allow people to stop and enjoy that view. So again, here are 3 of those ideas: the sustainable transport corridor, the neighbourhood centre, with the view here of people enjoying some alfresco dining, looking down towards Bridgend Farm and the houses that are overlooking that village central park. So finally, village 3 in the east of the site. Again, a strategic green corridor separates villages 2 and 3, which is at least 80 metres wide. And this is once again aligned with those views across the Surrey Hills. We're suggesting a viewing mound in the north of this area to take full advantage of those views and also of the views looking west along the full length of the Northern Sang. And this idea of ground modelling then comes into the greenway, where there could be a raised play mound that integrates natural play features into the landscape. Along the southern and eastern edges, we want to preserve the rural character of both Ockham Lane and Old Lane. So we're proposing a setback of about 20 metres of green space. And the houses along this edge will be low density and low rise, with opportunities to break up the edge of the development with landscape. So again, some images of these ideas, taking advantage of the views using the topography. This is the fruit mound in RHS Wisley, which sets up a view access towards the glasshouse. The green edge with low density houses set back from Ockham Lane. And of course, there's the variety of circular walks that we will be providing within the Sang. So following the various rounds of engagement and consultation so far, the framework's developed and evolved to address different considerations and to incorporate new ideas and opportunities. So this is the current framework that we're working on now. And you'll see it's still a strategic plan. It doesn't show individual houses, it shows the housing areas, the other land uses and the public open spaces. The different shades of yellow and orange represent different densities of homes, which we'll discuss later in the presentation. You can also see the village areas that are focused around the village greens. So as part of our design process, we've studied many of the surrounding villages to understand their forms and their architecture and their spaces. And there are a lot of village greens in Surrey, and they come in all shapes and sizes. They support different functions, they're surrounded by different uses. Some are open to the surrounding countryside, like this one, and some are enclosed by buildings and landscape. Many villages don't have a village green, but we feel that village greens would help our new settlement to develop its own identity and a sense of community and a sense of place. Village greens offer points of orientation and the opportunity to pause, which is incredibly important. So this is a sketch image of the first village green that greets you when you arrive from the west, with that view across the Surrey Hills that we frame using the buildings and the landscape. and that makes this village green unique. But each of the village greens will be unique with a different character containing different functions, and each will have a different community focus, such as a shop or a children's play area or a village pond, where people can come together to engage in village life. Now, as Camille said at the beginning, we're submitting an outline planning application. So we're not designing the buildings in detail at this stage. The homes we're showing here are illustrative. We will be designing the homes and streets later, and they will take their cues from the architectural forms, features, and materials of the local area. But this new settlement needs to create its own sense of identity. So we don't necessarily have to replicate those buildings, and we'd like to hear your views on the architectural approach that you feel we should adopt to make this place distinctive. So what makes a village green? Well, there's lots of things potentially. It's a landscape space, contains opportunities for wildlife and biodiversity, but it's also a social space where people can exercise and play and meet and potentially play sport. There are often a few shops or a cafe or a pub or a church, and potential for community and social events like Village Fete or the summer market, farmers market, sorry. And these are some examples of village greens and some of their features from the local area. So for example, that wonderful water pump at Brockham, and the signage that welcomes you to Warbleston, and the village pond at Chiddingfold. And most greens are primarily grass. They're characterised by their shape, their size, their aspect, and the uses around them. So what about the size and the scale of our spaces? Here are some comparison slides that show some of our green spaces in the red outline overlaid on some local village greens that you may know. So this is an outline of our Village 1 green overlaid on village greens at Shamley Green and Brockham, and you can see that the spaces are comparable. The size of our village park, which is larger, is comparable to Chiddingfold Green, and our Market Square is comparable in width to the linear spaces that you find in the centre of Cranley. And similarly, this green in Warbleston is similar to the size of our green in Village 3, and the linear space that extends from the green in Warbleston with its houses that are set back with wide green verges protecting the pedestrian and cycle route from the edge of the road is very similar to the approach that we're taking to segregate pedestrian cycle routes on our approach to the schools. So it'll bring us back to the question, what do you think we should be providing in our contemporary village greens? Is it the same as these examples or different? We've put some ideas here together, such as children's play, public art, local information board. So it'd be much appreciated if you can suggest your ideas in the feedback forms. So what sort of homes will we be providing here? Well, across the site, we're master planning for 2,000 homes overall, of which just under 1,800 will be on the Taylor Wimpey part of the site. Plus there'll be 100 specialist senior living apartments. We'll be providing a range of housing that meets the local need as set out in Guildford Borough Council's housing policy, which you can see from the pie chart is mainly 2 and 3 bedroomed homes. And 40% of the homes will be affordable tenures. And so it's great to have John here from Vivid, who will be able to answer any questions you have on that. We're required to make efficient use of the land, and the allocation and the SPD suggest that we should build at an average of 45 dwellings per hectare. So the density of homes will not be the same as the surrounding settlements. This place will have its own character and generally higher densities. At the first public consultation, we discussed density, and we showed you this diagram in the bottom corner, which we call the pebble in the pond. And essentially this shows how the density of the proposals decrease towards the edges of the new neighbourhood. And that allows us to create a range of different character areas that respond to specific parts of the site. The main diagram shows how this development shows how the density strategy has developed, and you'll see that the principles have remained the same. The lowest densities are in the yellow, and these are the more sensitive areas. They'll be mainly detached and semi-detached homes, and densities will be between 15 and 35 dwellings per hectare. The medium density is the pale orange, that's then spread out along the central spine road. And this would have more continuous frontages, more small apartment buildings. And then the higher density areas and the neighbourhood centre will have more apartments. And again, and in that area, we might expect more than 50% of the homes to be apartments. Similarly, this slide shows the potential heights of the buildings across the site, which follows a similar pattern to the density strategy. The lowest building heights are where we have the lowest densities, and the heights generally increase along the central corridor and towards the neighbourhood centre. but in general, the majority of buildings will be between 2 and 3 stories throughout. There'll be some 4-story buildings along the central spine and in the central village, and in sensitive areas, we can limit the heights to a maximum of 2 stories. On this second diagram, we've overlaid the massing zones onto the topography plans, which show that the taller zone in the centre is not on the highest part of the site, which is shown in the red. We're currently looking now at 3-dimensional studies to refine this strategy and to help us specifically locate any 4-story buildings and test how the roofscape will appear from the surrounding area. So what do these different densities look like? This sketch shows a low density edge from part of the northern Sang looking towards the 2 and 2.5 story detached and semi-detached homes. And you can see that the edges are quite organic, and we introduce landscape in front of the buildings and between the buildings to break down the edge of the development. And these are some examples of how low density homes have been designed in other places. And it'll be interesting to hear your views on the feedback forms regarding the style of architecture that you feel we should be designing here. This is a view now taken along the sustainable transport corridor in Village 1, and you can see that it is still generally 2 and 3-story buildings, and they're more continuous, and there are some small apartment buildings at the junctions and the key locations. And this shows the character that we're trying to create along here. It's very green, with segregated routes for cyclists and pedestrians. So it's about making a place where people feel comfortable walking and cycling. Lots of street trees, green boundaries and wide verges with sustainable drainage features. Again, this architecture is illustrative, and these local building forms and materials could equally be applied to in a more contemporary way, if that was the approach we took. These are some precedent examples of homes along a transport corridor with green spaces and wide verges and more continuous frontages. And the 2 views on the right are more vernacular and traditional, and the 2 views on the left a more contemporary approach. Away from the central corridor, the medium density areas will be designed as narrow streets and lanes. They'll be tighter, more pedestrian friendly, with slower traffic speeds and a variety of architectural forms and locally relevant materials such as brick and tile hanging. And on this slide again, we show a different variety of ways that other developments have achieved this type of character. Some of the streets are softer and greener, and some have a more intimate feel, but with a harder landscape treatment. So again, do you have any views on these approaches? And then this is a possible view of the neighbourhood centre. And here and in the surrounding areas, the residential densities become more intense and are consistently 3 and sometimes 4 stories. So here we're showing apartments above the shops, and in the distance you can see 3-story terraced houses and 4-story apartments which are overlooking the village park. Again, these images show a number of ways. Next. These images show a number of ways to treat the high density areas using apartment buildings, terraced homes, and homes over shops. We think that this part of the site is likely to become more contemporary in its style, while still being sensitive to the local area and the local forms, but we'd be interested in your views. Now, I mentioned the sustainable transport corridor that runs through the site and ties together all these different areas and connects all the different facilities. And whilst its character will change as it passes through the different parts of the development, it remains a constant element which helps to provide orientation. And its purpose is to connect to places and to encourage people to use more sustainable forms of transport by making it as easy as possible to get from one part of the site to another on foot or cycle via an attractive and safe route. So what would it look like? This next plan shows the character of the central spine as a wide green corridor with segregated routes for cars, for pedestrians and cyclists in order to reduce conflict. Road junctions and crossovers onto driveways are minimised, and where they do occur, the cyclists have priority over the cars. So it will be attractive, safe and legible route that connects all parts of the new settlement and helping to make that shift towards walking and cycling that bit easier. And it's not just about movement, it's about turning a road corridor into something more communal and celebrating it. It's about creating a green outlook for more people, introducing little pocket parks and the village greens as a point of orientation, somewhere to stop and chat, for the kids to play on their way home from school. And it's a sustainable drainage corridor. So it's something more than a road, it's a piece of infrastructure, that is, of green infrastructure, and it's a positive piece of placemaking. And all of the green spaces are hugely important in the master plan, both in the way that they create an attractive and pleasant environment, but also the way that they contribute towards a green and healthy neighbourhood, providing opportunities for people to be active and to socialise, which I think we've all recognised has become increasingly important. And this plan outlines some of those uses and how they might be used, from the SANG, which provides the opportunities for the circular walks and the trim trails and cycle routes, the greenways between the villages, which contain formal play areas, the village greens with their community focus, such as the local shop, and the sports facilities, which provide formal sports pitches, but also more informal opportunities to ride a bike or kick a ball. The allotments and the communal growing spaces, and then in the neighbourhood centre, more formal spaces, the market square and the school square, where parents can wait for their children. And then also the opportunities for views, both within and beyond the site, which we can't underestimate. The neighbourhood centre then provides a focus for the whole community. It will include shops, including a food store, and cafes. It will have community buildings such as a village hall and a health facility, and also employment uses. It will engage with the schools and with homes. So it's a genuine mix of uses. And the neighbourhood centre, again, it's arranged along the line of Hatch Lane. And this is retained as the rural lane in the south, then opens up to reveal this central park, where the 5 pedestrian routes converge. And within the park, there'll be a variety of uses: a children's play space, terrace seating for an informal lunch break, the opportunity for public events that might be organised through the community trust. And we've carried out surveys of facilities in some of the surrounding areas in order to understand the types of services that we might need to provide in our neighbourhood centre. And this shows one of the ways that we might organise the buildings and spaces. So we're in discussion with a number of potential users and operators, so things may change as we start to pull those different ideas together. But essentially, there will be a number of different buildings arranged around a progression of public spaces. And these spaces will offer a variety of characters and places that relate to the buildings around them. So, for example, the shops face onto the market square. Opportunity perhaps for a monthly farmers market. There's a small piazza by the cafe for outdoor eating, or a morning coffee, say. And there's a public landscape garden by the community centre. And then further north, the school square where parents can gather to chat at home time. In terms of the building uses, we're providing a food store with maybe 5 to 8 smaller shops or cafe units, and all of these would have apartments above. We've mentioned the village hall, the community hall that's run by the community trust, and we're talking to healthcare providers about the health care facility. There'll also be significant employment uses, and we're looking at how office space requirements may have changed in the post-COVID world. So potentially approaches that provide support to people who work from home or close to home by providing flexible office space and co-working space, like desk hire of meeting rooms, business advice, photocopying services, that type of thing. And I think it's generally recognised that there will be more home working in the future, and this type of facility I think is a very appropriate and exciting idea that will add vitality to the neighbourhood centre and be a real community resource. Another feature of the sustainable transport hub of the neighbourhood centre will be the sustainable transport hub, and this will be where you can lease your e-bike or your e-scooter. There will be rapid charging points available for electric cars and potentially an overhead charging point for an electric bus. So again, we've put together a couple of images of recent neighbourhood centres that show different types of character, and we'd appreciate your views in the feedback forms. So I'll finish my part of the presentation with our view of the neighbourhood centre, a cafe with outdoor seating, the community centre on the left, and ahead you've got the sustainable transport hub with its e-bikes and charging facilities, and then a row of shops with the apartments above. So I'll now hand over to Colin Mackay, who will discuss some highways issues. So thank you very much indeed.
Good morning, everyone. And apologies if you can see a bit of distortion on the picture of me due to, I think there's a graphics card problem with my laptop. My name is Colin Mackay, and for those who didn't attend the previous consultation, I'm the Technical Director leading the work WSP are doing on the transport aspects of the Wisley Airfield proposed development. Now, we've listened to the views of people who responded to the previous consultation in July, and we took away a number of points, including the ones shown here. We know there is general concern about traffic and achieving connections beyond the site boundary. However, there were also a number of encouraging points we took away. For example, the majority of respondents agreed with our sustainable transport priority, and a quarter of respondents answered that they might agree with that priority, but indicated that more clarity would be required. There was also good support for e-bikes and for bus services. So we have listened, and we want to show you how we've progressed since then. Firstly, I'll give you an update on general progress being made on the transport assessment. We're developing the traffic model that will be used to predict the traffic flows and any off-site mitigation required. The next stage will be to have the model checked by Surrey County Council and Highways England to make sure that it's fit for purpose. Once that has been done, we can assemble the future year traffic flows and carry out the transport assessment, as well as inform the air quality and noise assessments required for the environmental statement. This is set to take place early next year. Part of the transport assessment will be assessing the mitigation options for Ripley and the surrounding area. We need to follow a process set out by Highways England for mitigation options involving impacts on the A3 trunk road. This will involve looking at mitigation options, including the identified burnt common slips and any other associated mitigation measures to ensure that they're robust and deliverable. So looking at our next steps on transport, that engagement on the impacts and the schemes will take place during the rest of this year. Again, I say we're conscious of the concerns about traffic raised during the previous consultation in July, and we expect to have feedback on this during the early part of next year once the modelling is complete. We'll also be carrying out ongoing engagement with the stakeholders right up to submission of the application next year. However, in the meantime, we want to set out how we're seeking to reduce traffic levels through the adoption and promotion of sustainable transport measures. And sustainability is a mainstay of national and local policy. The adopted Guildford Borough Local Plan, Policy A35, which we set out here, shows what we are expected to address as part of the proposed development. It talks about access points, mitigation measures, and bus and cycle networks required for connectivity. And these ideas have been further developed by Guildford Borough Council in that council's supplementary planning document. Firstly, in terms of the vehicular connections to the external destinations shown here. And as you can see, this also includes some information on their expectations on bus links. And also on this extract, what it terms active travel links on foot and bicycle. These are all options we are actively exploring within the constraints we already know about from our detailed work to date. The Guildford Borough Council also set out 6 groups of sustainability principles to assist in delivering each of the strategic development sites in the local plan, not just Wisley Airfield. We are following these principles closely in design of the master plan and in our transport strategy generally. As already stated, Taylor Wimpey are taking this development to be an exemplar for sustainability, and clearly transport is a major aspect of that agenda. Most importantly, we want to influence travel decisions at the front door before the journey takes place. We're all familiar with the business as usual mindset, such as shown on the thoughts here. That mindset is driven by the availability, or mostly the lack of opportunities to do things differently. Behaviour change expert Martin will touch on this later, but if the opportunities are made available, then people are more likely to change their travel habits, given the right encouragement. By making these opportunities available, we aim to change that mindset to one that sees and makes use of the opportunities. Through thoughtful, intelligent design of the proposed development, people living on the development will see that the opportunities are all around them. And through publicity and promotion, the benefits will be pointed out to them. Simple things like where we store our cycles makes these decisions less agonised. Buses that run frequently and are easy to get to save time in searching for parking at destinations like town centres and railway stations. And if they use sustainable energy, that also introduces a feel-good factor. Some decisions will also reflect the changes in lifestyle some people may experience post-COVID, where they can work from home more frequently. We will be ensuring that adequate broadband connections are provided across the site. So let's look at buses in a little bit more detail. Looking at the layout of the site, as you can see in the bottom left corner of this slide, the site lends itself to bus services very well and means that a direct route through the site puts most houses within 200 metres of a bus stop and all of them within 400 metres, the recommended walking distance to a bus stop. The bus stops themselves will provide shelter and could also integrate green roofs or solar panels to maximise their sustainable contribution. Electric buses are becoming more accepted into operators' fleets and they offer cheaper running costs. Some are being used in Guildford already, as you will know. We will future-proof the site with charging infrastructure, as shown on Graham's sketch earlier, to make electric buses a practical option. We also want to build on and bolster existing services. Some existing services would be enhanced to improve the frequency within existing communities, improving the offer beyond the site, as well as serving the site itself. You can see this from the sketches here of the intended bus strategy, showing that some infrequent existing services, shown in dotted orange lines, would be enhanced to a more frequent service, as shown on the right. The priority is to serve the local railway stations, recognising the high proportion of rail travellers from this part of Surrey and the limited capacity of the car parks. So we will provide a high frequency service to match the train departures and arrivals as closely as practically possible. Walking may also be served with its higher frequency service to London and Hampshire and its retail and employment opportunities. Although we do recognise commuting train services have tended to be much busier and more crowded than the services via Effingham. Responding to feedback from Public Consultation 1, our service to Cobham will be provided if we possibly can, using one of the fleet of buses, probably not as frequent a service as the others, but it will allow, for example, shopping or personal business trips to this popular destination. As we show here, the number of buses in the fleet will be increased to meet demand as the proposed development progresses. It is very important to have a bus service in the early years of the development, although it will probably comprise smaller vehicles and a more limited number of destinations will be served. However, a 7-day service will still be offered even in the early years. In the later years, a fleet comprising a mix of vehicle sizes will go to all the identified destinations, and a longer daily service on the key routes will be provided to serve leisure trips and workers arriving late from London, for example. The bus services will be funded through the fares passengers pay, and in the early years, pump priming support will be available from Taylor Wimpey. So our predicted modal share for the bus service will be projected and validated using a range of other experience throughout the UK on similar developments. However, this will be calibrated to a more local experience. The Guildford urban area is an important reference, having model shares of up to 14% in some locations, and typically up to 8% by bus. On this basis, we believe that the bus services we will be proposing can be supported without substantial ongoing subsidy. I'll now talk a little bit about cycling before handing over to Martin to talk more in more detail about it. But I'll just introduce the policy initiatives. We're all aware that changes are being driven by international, national and local policy on transport. The Paris Accord, UK government policy initiatives, and even prime ministers are raising the profile of cycling. It is essential to maximise the uptake of walking and cycling. Much has been done recently in the UK to promote travel by bike over motorised travel. 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in town centres are now commonplace. The Highway Code consultation in progress at the moment proposes changes that will offer better protection to vulnerable road users, so that's pedestrians, cyclists and equestrians. And it places greater responsibility on car drivers to look after them. The cycle infrastructure now has to comply with guidance aimed at segregating cyclists from drivers and pedestrians and giving them priority over motor vehicles at junctions and road crossings. As Graham has already described, the master plan is being designed with this new guidance at the forefront. So I'll now hand over to Martin Higgett to discuss the particular ways we plan bringing forward cycling initiatives on site and about the role of behaviour change in achieving our sustainability objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. I'm Martin Higgett and I specialise in sustainable transport and travel behaviour change, and I'm contributing on measures to encourage cycling, including the provision of cycling facilities within the development and connections to external destinations, as well as travel plan and promotional measures. We're focusing a lot of effort on cycling because we think it shows real potential for trips within the development and to local destinations. It's a low impact form of transport, I should say. It provides great health benefits and there's growing national commitment to supporting cycling. Research shows that there's a large latent demand for cycling. Where there's been sustained investment, cycling levels have grown. In London, 2 decades of large-scale investment have led to a 144% growth in cycling levels. At the other end of the agenda, Sustrans regularly undertakes surveys of school-aged children across the country, showing that children are really keen to cycle, but it's often concerned parents that are stopping them. As the graph shows, during lockdown, cycling levels in England grew hugely and many people brought bikes and took it up, all while traffic levels were down. The main reasons stopping people tend to be the fear of traffic and lack of safe cycling infrastructure, as well as the availability of a bike, all issues we hope to address. A quick word next about e-bikes, as they have potential to substantially increase participation in cycling, are an important part of our strategy for the former Wisley Airfield site. Could I have the slide moved on, please? Thank you. E-bikes provide assistance when pedalling up to a speed of 15.5 miles an hour, at which point the motor cuts off. Research and initial pilot projects have shown that they are really good for widening the market for cycling and encouraging take-up, particularly amongst women and older people, and people who have some sort of physical restriction that makes cycling a pedal bike difficult. E-bikes enable people to take up longer journeys. The average e-bike journey is 50 to 60% longer than a pedal bike journey, and e-bike users tend to increase the number of trips they take by bike. They've been shown to be particularly effective at replacing journeys previously made by car. Nearly 2/3 of journeys in the UK are below 5 miles in length, which is the average distance of an e-bike journey. In Cambridgeshire, which is our foremost cycling area in the country, they're now starting to build greenways to a ring of villages within 10 miles of Cambridge in recognition and anticipation that journeys into Cambridge will be attractive to cycling and to e-bikes. We're looking at providing high quality cycling infrastructure both within development as well as links to important local destinations. The rationale behind these measures is that they should be acceptable to the average cyclist. The recent government cycle infrastructure guidance provides clear guidance on what sort of infrastructure needs to be provided on roads with different levels of traffic and different speeds. So in the development itself, as Graham highlighted, we'll be providing high quality segregated cycle facilities along the main spine road and connecting to the key routes towards external destinations. And just to give you an illustration of some of the types of infrastructure we're examining for those links, the first column shows types of solution for busier traffic routes. The ideal is for fully segregated routes, keeping motor traffic and bikes apart. That top example shows a scene from the Netherlands with its excellent cycling infrastructure, but of course we lack that sort of space in the local area. But generally on busier routes, we want to provide some level of segregation. On rural routes where there's insufficient space on the carriageway, some options include going behind the hedge, or on lightly trafficked routes, removing the centre line and demarcating cycle lanes. And on residential streets, a 20-mile-an-hour limit can allow cyclists to mix safely with general traffic. Traffic-free routes can be useful, particularly for leisure journeys. They need to have a decent width where they are shared with pedestrians, have smooth surfaces, and importantly, be well maintained. When we're in conservation areas or other sensitive environments, we want to make sure that cycling provision respects that location. So in the left-hand column, there are a couple of illustrations of road treatments that respect the local environment and slow traffic so that cyclists can mix safely with general traffic. Clear signing of cycle routes is important, and lighting, particularly of off-road routes, needs careful consideration. There's an issue of whether to light or not, but where decisions are taken to provide lighting, there are solutions that minimise upward light pollution. Finally, secure, convenient cycle parking at final destinations is crucial. And there are plenty of good examples of high-quality cycle parking at railway stations, for example. The policy challenge is to provide cycle links suitable for the average cyclist to 4 local destinations: East Horsley, Effingham Junction, Ripley and Byfleet. And we're currently developing our proposals for these links. All of these destinations are within easy cycling distance, and the bike journeys are easily completed in 10 to 20 minutes and don't take a lot more time than driving. In some cases, such as Byfleet, cycling will be a lot quicker. We're currently looking at different route options to these destinations and considering appropriate types of cycle infrastructure, as highlighted in the previous slides. I've produced a map there, and in red lines we've labelled our preferred routes to the 4 key destinations, and in green solid lines are Surrey County Council existing cycle infrastructure, and in green dotted lines are Surrey County Council aspirations for future cycle provision. So we're considering how the connections we deliver can link into existing routes and future aspirational routes. We hope this shows that how our proposals will link strongly with existing and planned infrastructure to substantially increase the network of safe cycle routes in the wider area, making it possible to reach a range of destinations, not just for residents of our new community, but enabling many from surrounding communities to confidently and safely make cycle journeys. And we'd welcome, again, specific feedback on whether there are any other cycle routes to key destinations that we should be thinking of. Finally, from me for today, just to say a few words about promotional measures. We would look to undertake a lot of promotional activity through the travel plan to maximise the uptake of sustainable transport services and facilities that we provide. There would be travel plans for the different elements of the development, including the residential, employers and schools. Possible promotional measures that we're currently working on include the following. So developing a website and travel app to provide up-to-date information to residents and site users on their travel options and providing easy access to some of the services we'll offer. Welcome packs provided to residents showing the facilities available on site and in neighbouring settlements and the travel options available to them. Sales staff would be trained to advocate the sustainable transport options when people are contemplating moving here. It's really important that we start to influence the way people think about their travel options before they move in. There would be a programme of ongoing support for sustainable travel, including social walks, social bike rides, bike tryouts, cycle training, adopt a bike, and maintenance classes, as well as car club demos. We're developing ideas for a bike and e-bike loan scheme where residents or employees on site are offered a bike or an e-bike for a month's tryout free of charge, and then can extend the loan or buy. We're also looking at the potential for a subscription service where a resident may pay a monthly fee and receive free car club membership, discounted bike loan, and discounted bus fares. And this way we can hopefully make all the sustainable transport options readily available to people and increase their loyalty towards them. So promotional activities can be highly effective, especially if they're introduced alongside good infrastructure and services. And for new developments, the key really is to influence people early when they've arrived, to embed those habits from day one and avoid people becoming reliant on the car. So again, in the Q&A and feedback, we'd be keen to hear from you about what ideas you have that could persuade our residents to use sustainable transport modes. And on the next slide, how else could our proposals benefit or help the local community to travel by more sustainable means? And that's it from me, and I'll hand over to Rob, who's going to talk about sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Good morning all. My name's Rob Miller. I'm an associate at Greengage Environmental. We're a dedicated sustainability consultancy, and we're supporting Taylor Wimpey to develop the overarching sustainability strategy for the development. The intention of the sustainability process here is to coordinate a holistic approach to deliver sustainability best practice across the development. And Taylor Wimpey are pushing the whole design team to ensure that sustainability performance is maximised throughout the design. We've already heard about lots of great design ambitions as part of developing the master plan, and we'll hear about many more in a moment, which will assist in creating a sustainable development. And the process detailed below aims to document those interventions in a structured and robust framework. So this process was initially presented to and agreed with Guildford Borough Council and aims to communicate the sustainability journey for the master plan development from the initial sustainability vision through development of the strategy, which we're doing at the moment, and then monitoring within the framework to robustly document performance across all of the technical subjects. And further to the development of the sustainability approach, we've produced the following 7 vision principles, which have been presented in the first instance to Guildford Borough Council and as part of the first design review panel meeting. Initial feedback from these discussions was for the development of outcome-based targets, which are being produced now as part of the developing strategy. The intention is that these topics cover the full scope of sustainability issues and have been developed to align with and respond to relevant policy and guidance. So this includes both the recent climate change SPD and also the Making Sustainable Places in Guildford principles, as already mentioned by Colin and Antonis. As a baseline, we'll be targeting policy compliance. However, the ambition here is to aim for best practice and innovation wherever possible, and for the development as a whole to represent exemplar sustainability performance. So in terms of our current activity, we're working with the design team to develop our initial sustainability strategy, exploring the targets and interventions that are achievable within each of the different principles. This has involved workshops on each of the key topics to explore opportunities to maximise performance, and this initial version of the strategy is close to completion in its first draft. The intention is for this to be circulated for comment, and we want this to be very much a joined up approach with all community stakeholders. The key overall outcome of the strategy is to ensure that all of the developments of sustainable design work together in a single cohesive approach that positively impacts on the natural environment, maximises social value and offers economic benefit to the development locally and also to the wider community. And the image below illustrates the connections between technical disciplines that contribute toward creating a sustainable community, such as between the transport strategies we've heard about and health and well-being, the green infrastructure approach and climate resilience and biodiversity and education, for example. And the sustainability strategy aims to capture these interactions. And one of the key themes that forms a critical part of the sustainability story is that of the energy strategy. So in its simplest form, Taylor Wimpey want to make the proposed homes as energy efficient as possible so reducing reliance on fossil fuels and reducing the overall carbon footprint of the development. To this end, the energy strategy would be aligned with current industry recognised pathways to net zero carbon emissions. Now, the first stage of the strategy is to reduce energy demand by using very energy efficient materials and building fabric. The likely preferred option for energy delivery would be an electric-based system, which aligns with the phasing out of gas infrastructure in new homes by 2025. And then finally, renewable technology will be integrated into the scheme, which might be in the form of solar PV, as shown in some of the images, as well as other smart technologies like battery storage, for example, that can help manage energy consumption across a development. And then finally, we're also considering the embodied carbon of development. So this is the energy associated with extracting, manufacturing and transporting materials used to build the scheme. And this impact will be measured and a range of options reviewed to minimise embodied carbon of the project. So thanks very much. This is all from me on the sustainability strategy at this stage, and I'll now hand over to Sam to discuss the landscape approach for the scheme.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Hi, my name's Sam Hart and I'm Director at Davies Landscape Architects. We've been working closely with the architects and ecologists to create an attractive and multifunctional landscape which will protect, restore and enhance the existing sensitive features whilst providing opportunities for new landscape experiences, uses and habitats. These are all grouped together under the banner of Green Infrastructure, or GI. We've set out on the following slides how this has been progressing and how comments in the various consultations have been incorporated into the developing landscape. The last year has really emphasised the importance of easy access to open space and contact with nature for our mental and physical well-being. We aim to create a series of different landscapes and experiences which will be interconnected and provide multifunctional green spaces which will be accessible by all ages and abilities. The landscapes will form an important element in the character and setting of each village, as well as bringing GI and biodiversity into the heart of each development. The GI will also afford opportunities to improve air quality, reduce noise from the A3 and alleviate drainage issues, and will play an integral part in the sustainability of the development. It will form an adaptable, robust landscape framework which will be resilient against the changes of climate and will endure into the next century. As part of this process, it's our aspiration to work closely with RHS Wisley to benefit from the innovation and research into plant selection and management. The scale of the landscape provides opportunities for us to bring elements of the gardens into the site through features such as formal gardens in the village centres, parkland tree species, and as described by Graham, a potential arboretum. Next slide, thanks. As illustrated on the historic map shown on this slide, the majority of the landscape framework was lost when the former agricultural landscape was changed into the airfield. There are some remnants of the former hedgerows and field patterns visible around the perimeters and along Stratford Brook. The airfield provides an opportunity for us to create a unique and distinctive setting to the new villages. As an overriding strategy, we've begun to take inspiration from the rich history of parkland and commons that can be found in the surrounding landscape. These will be redesigned to reflect 21st century lifestyles and become a model of sustainable and high quality landscape design. Next slide. As part of the developing vision we've come up with and a series of objectives that are driving the design choices were outlined by Graham earlier. As shown on the previous map, there are a number of opportunities to restore landscape features such as woodland and hedgerows. Existing features such as trees, hedgerows and the woodland will be protected as part of the design and enhanced to improve their quality and longevity and be reconnected to the wider landscape. The reinforcement of the boundaries and connectivity of the landscape within the site will reinstate the smaller scale patterns evident in the wider countryside and provide a more intimate setting for development. The proposals will provide a significant increase in the quality and quantum of key features such as hedgerows, trees and grasslands, and will extend from the wider setting into the villages. Green corridors will divide and provide setting for the distinctive villages and include opportunities for formal and informal recreation and social interaction. We will look at the potential types and opportunities on the following slides. In order to successfully set the development within the landscape, scale, density and height will be carefully considered and tested throughout the design. This will ensure that the proposals can be successfully assimilated into the surrounding and existing proposed landscape framework. This is particularly relevant along the southern boundary and the higher parts of the site to the east. The division of the development into 3 villages by the strategic green corridors will break up the roofscape and massing and views, including limited elevated views from the A and B. Tree planting along streets, pocket parks and squares will further break up views of the wider development. Another way of integrating the built form into the landscape will be to use neutral hues and tones in the building design to avoid stark contrast with the naturalised setting. The majority of the landscape around the development will provide a local and easily accessible naturalised parkland, which will allow people to connect with nature on their doorstep. Within these areas, we can create a wide range of native habitats, including woodland, hedgerows, wildflower meadows, marshy grassland and scrub mosaics. We'll provide a wide network of interlinking circular walks and cycle routes, including links to the existing public rights of way. These will run through the parkland and open space corridors, providing connection between the 3 villages and routes off-site. Within the site, we'll provide a series of short and medium circular routes and include a long route, which will probably be about 9.5 kilometres. Some footpaths and cycleways will be shared surfaces and will be constructed in self-binding aggregates. Others will be less formal. Along these routes, we will introduce features such as seating areas, art installations and trim trails to provide additional points of interest to draw people into the landscape. We would be interested to hear any further suggestions or examples that you can think of. The development will provide a wide range of opportunities to enjoy the landscape, and we've summarised these on the following slides. So policy P5 sets out an approach to the protection of the Thames Basin Heath through the provision of suitable alternative natural green space, or SANG. The provision of 50 hectares of SANG within the site complies with this requirement and provides the majority of the landscape to the north and south. Local Plan Saved Policy R2 requires us to provide an additional minimum of 14 hectares of different open space types, as shown on the pie chart and summarised on the slide. In addition, we'll be aiming to provide facilities where there may be a shortfall in the area, and again, we'd be interested on any thoughts you have on this. The existing landscape features provide opportunities for 2 differing types of SANG. To the north, the existing arable fields and hardstanding will be transformed into a new wildlife haven with lots of features to draw people in. That will consist of mixed native woodland, copses, grasslands and wildflower meadows interspersed with ponds and linear swales to add interest and further opportunities for wildlife. New landforms will be introduced to visually break up the openness between the footpath and cycle links and create opportunities for views and vistas towards points of interest and opportunities for natural play. The routes and views will be supplemented with art and sculptures, as well as seating areas and picnic benches. The northern SANG will also include a trim trail and park run routes linking with all the villages. The southern SANG runs along the Stratford Brook and consists of a wet woodland and steep southern slopes, which provide an alternative range of habitats and visual experiences. These experiences will focus on the existing mature Stratford Brook corridor, and we've included, as Graham described, a boardwalk through the marshy grassland and bluebell areas, and this has been mentioned in previous consultations. The steeper slopes will be managed for species-rich grasslands and will be interspersed with drainage features to create interesting local points and habitat opportunities. The southern boundary around Bridge End Farm provides opportunities for key views of the South Downs. These will be incorporated into the vistas and routes. Play forms an integral part of children's development and an important element to the building of community. The proposals will afford for a wide range of experiences and opportunities in a range of environments for young and older children. These will be set within the recommended walking distances along safe routes and will all have clear natural surveillance. Okay, next slide. The development will provide informal and formal spaces, which will provide a wide range of opportunities for recreation, socialising, interacting with nature, as well as creating attractive settings and identities to each of the villages. We've summarised a selection of potential activities here, but again, we're open to any further suggestions of things you'd like to see included. It's important to harness the mental and physical welfare benefits that growing food can bring and provide the opportunity for food production on people's doorsteps. Again, we've just set out a couple of bullets here of things that we're considering at the moment, and would really love to hear your thoughts on these. These will range in size from the more traditional allotments to other localised community and educational opportunities. The SANG will provide opportunities to incorporate informal food gathering, such as foraging routes. Okay. The ongoing consultations have identified local concerns regarding runoff from the airfield. The drainage strategy is being developed to alleviate this situation and capture all current and future runoff within the site. Flood risk will be managed in a positive way, celebrating water and its value as a precious resource not to be wasted. It will be a highly integrated and holistic system, linking the urban and green infrastructure. It will provide and enhance biodiversity opportunities, create attractive features such as naturalised and formal ponds, and be interconnected through ditches and swales. It will provide opportunities for rain gardens, biofiltration beds, art, play, and educational opportunities. The water and suds will also be used within the site to harvest and irrigate public spaces. I'll now pass you on to Rebecca, who will talk through ecology.
Thanks, Sam, and good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can see me okay. My name is Dr. Rebecca Brookbank, and I'm the Technical Director at Ecological Planning and Research Limited, an ecological consultancy. My job is to ensure that ecology and wildlife is taken into account in all aspects of the project and is protected as part of the scheme. This includes making sure we have up-to-date survey information regarding the features present on the site, carrying out impact assessments and designing mitigation, feeding back ecological requirements to the master planning and design teams, and providing advice and supervision for ongoing site investigations, as well as during implementation. We know that local residents have expressed concern about the existing wildlife on site and how it will be protected. And I want to reassure you that conserving the existing features of ecological importance on site is our priority too, and we're working very closely with the design team on this. Some of you may have heard my colleague Jodie talk about existing ecological habitats and species at the site during the last public consultation. So this time I'd like to share our thoughts on how we can integrate biodiversity into the whole development, and in doing so mitigate ecological impacts, create new habitats and features of ecological value, and ensure overall gains for biodiversity. We had some really good feedback from this on the previous public consultation, so thank you to those of you who contributed. We're committed to delivering biodiversity net gain, so I'd first like to talk a bit about this concept and then look at how we can achieve this at the former Wisley Airfield. Biodiversity net gain is a concept that's gaining traction through national and local planning policy and is likely to become a legal requirement when the government's Environment Bill is passed. It essentially means that after development, an area or site is in better shape for biodiversity than it was before, for example, through increases in the overall extent of wildlife habitat and improvements in the distinctiveness, condition, and/or connectivity of those habitats, which in turn has benefits for the plant and animal species that they support. Biodiversity net gain is often measured through a biodiversity metric or calculation tool, which estimates the percentage gain or loss. We're aiming for a minimum 10% net gain using the metric provided by Natural England. So in order to work out whether you can achieve a biodiversity net gain, you first need to understand and quantify your baseline habitats, or what is there already. We have over 10 years worth of survey data for the former Wisley Airfield site, and we're still updating this regularly. We know that the vast majority of the site is intensive arable, sprayed with all kinds of chemicals and not wildlife friendly, and hard standing that's of very limited ecological value. We found that most of the biodiversity interest is associated with the areas of scrub, woodland and rough grassland around the boundaries and at the western end of the airfield, which are the areas included in the Site of Nature Conservation Importance. These habitats support protected species such as badgers, great-crested newts, reptiles, several species of nesting birds, foraging bats, as well as other mammals including hedgehogs. The next step in calculating biodiversity gain is to quantify the different habitats that will be created by the scheme, and the biodiversity metric takes into account the time different habitats take to reach maturity. At the former Wisley Airfield, we have a huge opportunity to create really extensive areas of wildlife-rich habitats from the concrete and intensive arable land that's currently there. As you saw on the master planning slides earlier, the scheme can deliver over 50 hectares of sang and other green spaces, which will be connected to each other and to the wider landscape. The sang alone will be one of the largest in Surrey. We're also working closely with our sustainability consultants, who you heard from earlier, on ways to build wildlife habitats into the residential areas too, which is something that came through really strongly in the feedback from the first consultation. I'm now going to show you some examples of how biodiversity gains can be delivered on the next couple of slides. Firstly, we'd like to use the huge areas of sang and green space to create expansive wildflower-rich meadows interspersed with scrub and woodland planting, banks and bunds and wetland features. We'll integrate these new habitats with existing habitats, such as the Stratford Brook woodland in the southwest corner of the site, pictured on the slide, and the rough grassland and scrub that already supports species of conservation interest, and manage these in the long term with wildlife in mind. Now, when we say manage, we don't mean neat manicured parks. We want these green spaces to be wild and natural. So what we're talking about is things like controlling invasive non-native species, reducing the nutrient levels in the grasslands over time to promote the growth of wildflowers, and maintaining a balance of the different habitats as a mosaic, allowing some natural succession, but also preventing highly competitive species like bramble, nettle and bracken from completely taking over, which is what is happening now at the western end of the site. The idea is to create the right conditions for existing wildlife populations to be able to expand and move around the landscape, and also to attract new species. The key to this will be creating botanically and structurally diverse habitats, as these support large and diverse populations of insects, which in turn provide food for species of birds, bats, reptiles, amphibians, and other mammals. Varied habitats also create the right conditions to support other key life cycle requirements, such as nesting, roosting, breeding, commuting, hibernating, as well as providing places for refuge. We've listened to concerns about the potential for wildlife to be disturbed within the sang, and this is something we're looking at carefully as part of the design process. The advantage of having such a large sang is that there's plenty of space to play with, so we're going to make sure that there's plenty of cover and dense vegetation away from paths and busier areas that will remain relatively undisturbed. The large extent of new habitat created as part of the scheme will also allow wildlife populations to increase in size, which will make them more resilient to disturbance. In terms of the built environment, there are many opportunities to create roosting, nesting and foraging resources for wildlife, as well as to create a pleasant environment for people to live. This is really important because there are plenty of species that can thrive in more urban environments if the resources are there. We want to make the most of every part of the site, not just the sang and green spaces, and we want them to be well connected. These photos illustrate just a small selection of the kinds of suggestions people made last time regarding wildlife features that could be incorporated. For example, houses and other kinds of structure can easily have integrated bird and bat bricks, like the Swift brick shown here. Bug hotels can be installed just about anywhere. Street planting can provide plants for pollinators, and fruit trees in parks and gardens are great for birds and insects. Green roofs can also be used in clever ways, for example on numerous small structures such as cycle stores, bus stops and bin stores, as well as on large structures, and everything adds up. The Taylor Wimpey team have encouraged us to be really creative and innovative where designing for biodiversity is concerned, so please do let us have your ideas. Maybe you know about some local initiatives or groups we could talk to. Maybe you have some ideas about biodiversity features we could incorporate. We have ideas like providing each new household with a guide to wildlife-friendly gardening. The possibilities are endless, so please let us have your ideas and thoughts. That's all from me for now, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about ecology and biodiversity at the end. And I'm now going to hand you over to Mark, who's going to talk to you about stewardship and legacy.
Many thanks, Rebecca. I'm Mark Patchett, a specialist in stewardship, legacy, and associated charitable trusts within new housing developments. All of the facilities described by my colleagues, including the sang, children's play areas, community buildings, the sports and leisure facilities, and the public open space, will need to be maintained and managed in perpetuity after Taylor Wimpey have finished and left. To do so, Taylor Wimpey intend to create a new stewardship and legacy organisation to both manage all the public facilities and to use those facilities to create a strong sense of community. Next slide, please. This proposal was supported by 97% of responses to the July consultation. The image you can see on screen is the front page of the website of a very successful legacy trust I set up 10 years ago in Chichester. And the other images used within the following stewardship slides are also live examples of successful community trusts. At Wisley Airfield, all of the community assets will be transferred to this new stewardship organisation. But it will not just be about the ownership and maintenance of all of the public facilities. The organisation will also host events, activities, and encourage new community groups, all designed to create a strong sense of community. This will require working with all stakeholders, parish councils, existing and new local residents, Ockham Parish Church, sports clubs and community groups, Vivid, and of course the local authority. Not just for the new residents of Wisley Airfield, but also for the existing residents within the surrounding areas, enabling integration within the new settlement and between the new and existing communities. This new organisation will be a charitable trust, accountable to residents and other relevant stakeholders, employing maintenance and community development staff and managing its own resources. We intend to ensure that facilities and activities at Wisley Airfield complement those in neighbouring parishes. Ideally, we'd like to see full integration where new residents use shops, facilities, places of worship in the surrounding areas and vice versa. And we're open to guidance and suggestions from this consultation as to how you see integration being taken forward. The Trust will be an enabling organisation, empowering and supporting residents to take initiative, to know their neighbours, start clubs and activities, and to help build that sense of community. Taylor Wimpey will ensure that the whole new settlement is sustainable, socially, ecologically, and environmentally. And we want existing and new residents to help set the agenda. And so we welcome any thoughts or insights as to what that might be within this new stewardship and legacy strategy. I'll now pass back over to Antonis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and to the rest of the team for presenting us with our latest framework plan and ideas following all the feedback we've received to date. If I may, we're now going on to the Q&A part of the event today. If it's okay, we'll take a short break just for a few minutes and come back at 11:30 if that's okay. So 2 or 3 minute comfort break. Thank you to all of those that have been submitting questions throughout the presentation. Please do continue to submit your questions and we look forward to answering them in a few minutes time. So see you at 11:30. Thank you. So thank you again for all your questions. If it's okay, may I take the first question, please? Okay, so when will we see the types of houses you propose? Camilla, is it worth just outlining the planning strategy and then maybe over to Graham, if that's okay?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Adonis. So as Adonis explained at the start of the presentation, this is chapter 2 of 3. So we're working on the house types at the moment, and Graham, he'll go into this, but has completed a villager study to understand what the surrounding vernacular is. And we also do understand from the SPD that this place should have its own distinctive character, and that's something that we are trying to push also. So we're bringing all these things together, and we're really hoping that by our third consultation we'll have some more detailed plans on the actual house types to share with everybody. Graham, is there anything you would like to add on to that?
Sorry, trying to find my camera button then. No, I mean, I think that's well said. That this is currently an outline planning application, so the design of the homes will be subject to separate reserve matters applications in the future, and people will have the opportunity then to comment and be consulted on those. In terms of the design, though, obviously it's important to us that we understand the different ways that this development could be designed, and we will be producing a design code after the outline application, which starts to set out the key design requirements and the characteristics of the buildings. And as Camille said, we've carried out a number of studies of local villages because we want to understand the building forms, the design features, the local materials that are that we see in the local area. That doesn't mean to say we will be replicating those buildings, but we want to take design cues from the study to ensure that there are features there which make this place relevant to the local area. But at the same time, we want the settlement to have its own sense of identity. As we've said before, the densities of this are not the same as the surrounding areas, so it will be different. But we want the local area to inform the architecture. Hope is that helpful?
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Camille. We've also had a question from Catherine asking, why is senior living put next to the school complex? Surely there are noise impacts with this. Camille, probably one for yourself. I know we've had some engagement actually with the medical practice. So I didn't know if you wanted to answer this question.
No, it's a really good question, Catherine, actually, and it's something that we are thinking about closely. So that's really good feedback that you know, we need to obviously be considering the noise impacts on that also, but we're seeing it from a positive perspective actually. In our first master plan, we had the extra care units further from the school, and then decided actually to put them close together. They, you know, having that relationship between the older generation and the younger generation, they can really learn a lot from each other, and they're two really key parts of the community. So we're seeing it more from the social side and the benefits they can really provide to each other. And this is something that we've discussed with the local GP practices, and that's something that they support. But we totally take your point about the noise, to make sure that that's treated from you know, the school hours and not providing a noise impact onto those the older residents there. Graham, anything you'd like to add?
I'd like to add, yes. I mean, there are a number of studies that have demonstrated the benefits of co-locating young facilities for young people and facilities for old people together. And there are lots of examples actually of schools that are linking up with old people's accommodation to have sort of cross-fertilizing relationships, so that the old people go into the schools to help with their reading, etc., and that the children support the older people at certain times. So there's definitely some benefits with having them together that have been studied. Of course, within the senior living blocks themselves, there will be some opportunities for flats and apartments that are overlooking the school, but of course there are lots of flats and apartments that are away from the school and won't have the noise issues that we've been discussing.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Camille. There's a question in regards to from Catherine. There's a few Catherines on the call. So where do your proposed cycle lanes lead to off-site? Martin, I believe you had a slide up previously, so it might be worth just highlighting or summarising those key destinations, and then in regards to where we are about the links between the proposed development and these key destinations.
Yeah, so the policy requirement from Guildford Borough Council asks for safe cycling links to be provided to 4 destinations, which are Ripley, Byfleet, and when I say Byfleet, we're meaning Byfleet and then on to Byfleet and Newhaugh railway station, East Horsley and Effingham Junction. So we're looking at links at the moment. We've done quite a bit of work assessing the types of cycle infrastructure that would be needed to provide safe links along those roads, depending upon the nature of those roads and the traffic speeds and volumes, and are coming up with proposals. It's undoubtedly challenging on some of these routes. Some of the comments in the Q&A have said, you know, some of these are narrow, quite highly trafficked roads. But we're doing some sort of engineering investigations now on some of the pinch points of those areas, so that we can come back in the next consultation with our clear preference on which routes we're going to take and the type of infrastructure along the different parts of those links.
Thanks, Martin. And I think it's fair to say the next round of consultation, so in early 2021, we hope to have more detail on what that looks like, obviously, once we've done our due diligence. There's a question from Roy here. What and where will sewage treatment plant for the proposed development? So I think that's what and where will be sewage treatment plant for this proposed development. So probably a question for maybe Lee, actually, in regards to where we are about that infrastructure.
Yeah, just to give you an update of where we are with the sewage and the drainage for the particular site. We are liaising with Thames Water in terms of what off-site reinforcement is required to develop a site of this size. I'm going to be honest, any site of this size in the UK generally requires an off-site reinforcement. So where we would propose to locate it would be more down the west end of the site, because that's where the main drainage connection would be. We haven't quite got to the point where have we decided whether it's a treatment works or it actually goes directly to the sewage works of Thames. So we're not quite there yet, but it will be one or the other.
Thank you, Lee. A question in regards to what will be built first. Probably Lee and Camilla, I think you're both going to say the same thing about placemaking. I think it's also important to highlight the first delivery of Sang as well. So
I'll let Camille go first in this one, ladies first.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. We, as touched on Graham and the team earlier, we are submitting an outline planning application. So if that outline planning application gets approved, we will then be submitting our first RMA, which is a reserved matters application. That will be for our first parcel of housing, and as said by Adonis, also our first phase of Sang, which is really, really key for us. And what we're thinking is we'll provide our first phase of Sang, as well as our first phase of housing, and also some community uses and non-residential uses to support that, to maintain that placemaking. Is there anything to add to that, Lee?
No, I mean, you've covered it well. You know, to Taylor Wimpey, placemaking is very important. It's not just about the housing, as I mentioned earlier, but, you know, people have to be able to live, work and play. And there's no point delivering a large quantum of houses and having no community facilities or placemaking available. What's really positive about this particular proposal is the Sang. You know, this is one of the largest Sangs in Surrey, and a large proportion of it will be open day one, prior to any houses. So that's a really big mark in the sand, and that's a really positive thing, because that doesn't only help just the new community, but the existing community too, because it's there for everyone to use.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Camille. There's been a question relating to highways, and actually there's a few questions in regards to highways, and it's from David, who said, I understand work on the site cannot start until the proposed highway works planned for Junction 10 and other necessary road improvements in the area. Could this mean that subject to planning approval work, would we not be able to start before 2023 up to completion of 2035? So I think
I can cover that, AP. Yeah. As you may or may not be aware, there is a large quantum of road improvements on the M25 Junction 10 A3 connection. Some widening of the A3. Now, all of these works are being undertaken by Highways England. They are nothing to do with this site. But what's important that we understand that we link in with these works to reduce any disruption to existing residents. So one of the things that we're negotiating at the moment with Highways England is to share a construction access, so we don't send lots of lorries down roads that we don't want to. That should minimise any disruption to existing residents. In terms of programme dates, the actual highways works, including the Wisley Lane, have to be open to the public before we occupy. So whilst we can actually start work subject to the necessary planning approvals, what will be linked is we won't be able to occupy our houses until the works for the Highways England have been open to the public. Now, that is something which, so you will see construction happening on site, as I said, subject to the necessary approvals.
Thanks, Lee. And I think that actually leads on to another question in regards to timings and why we have submitted the Stub Road and Roundabout application. Camille, obviously, we have submitted the Stub Road and Roundabout application in October. It might be prudent just to share with everyone today what was the thinking from Taylor Wimpey's perspective as to why.
Yeah, of course. So with the Stub Road, so we've obviously submitted the roundabout and Stub Road, which sits on top of the Wisley Lane diversion, as submitted by the Secretary of by Highways England, to be decided by the Secretary of State early next year. The idea there was, if our application is approved, and it will be decided post the Highways England works being decided, we can tie into Highways England build programme. So we only need to build that roundabout once, rather than Highways England building the Wisley Lane diversion and us coming then afterwards to dig up that road again and build another roundabout. So the idea there is really to minimise any disruption to the surrounding residents and trying to be as efficient as we can. Lee, your camera is on. Anything to add?
Yes.
I think, do the job once. I think, you covered it really well there, Camille. There's no point Highways England putting in a brand new Wisley Lane diversion over to the RHS Wisley Gardens and us going digging up a brand new road. So that was our thought process behind it. And that's why, it seems a bit unusual to be submitting that now, but that was a basic function of it, to reduce any disruption to existing residents.
And I think it's just worth reiterating there again, actually, that we will only be decided by Guildford Borough Council once we have a decision or a known decision on the Highways England works, as obviously that comes first in the decision-making process.
Yeah, and just to give everyone some comfort, that is likely to be January of next year.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question similar to one we actually received on Thursday. So one of the main routes to West Byfleet will take you over the extremely narrow bridge at the Anchor. Are you planning to widen this and the road itself, which is very narrow? So Colin, is it okay if you could kindly answer this question?
Of course. Yes, the same question was asked on Thursday, and it's I think it's it's in relation to the plan that we showed, showing the Guildford Borough Council supplementary planning document and their suggested routes for bus services, one of which was shown on Wisley Lane. I know the area very well, as you could probably imagine. So I know that the location you're talking about further up at the crossing point where there's a lock gate. I know it's very narrow there, and it's only barely wide enough to get a family car across there. So in our view, for Taylor Wimpey, we would not be suggesting a bus route goes up Wisley Lane, nor in fact any substantial amounts of traffic. So it's definitely not, in my mind, as being a bus route that we would support. It was purely an idea that Guildford Borough Council's consultants came up with at the time they drew up the supplementary plan documents.
Thank you, Colin. I just thought it was important for you to answer that question again, as clearly the residents are concerned of that. So thank you for that. If I could have the next question, if I may. Yep, so there's a question here which I think a few people have asked similar. So you state you have a focus on encouraging cycling in and around the new development. What is being done to improve cycle lane links to adjacent villages such as Ripley and Horsley, and towns such as Woking, which are currently shared with main road traffic and are in many cases quite dangerous? So that's a question actually put forward by Paul and Catherine. Very similar question there. Probably one for Martin and Colin again, if I may.
As I said before, we're in the middle of looking at these links now, and we're using the latest government cycle infrastructure guidance called LTN 120, which was published in July, which gives good design standards on what needs to be provided according to volumes of traffic and speeds of traffic on roads. So as I say, on busier roads, such as, for instance, Ripley, we'd be looking to have fully segregated cycling facilities between the Ockham Park roundabout and the centre of Ripley. And on some of the other roads, if we were to go towards Horsley via Longreach, we would be looking at a sort of a rural lane treatment, because it's not a main through route, to be prioritising cyclists on that route. But we're in the middle of investigations because, as I've said, there are a few points on some of these routes which are quite challenging, and we're making sure we've got robust proposals, and we'll have those in place to present at the next round of consultation.
Thanks, Martin. We've had a question probably relating back to, please could you say more about road changes relating to access to RHS Wisley? So probably could just answer this, but do feel free, team, to join in, just so we're all aware. This is obviously the last framework plan and the most up to date. And what you'll see is Highways England are proposing to construct, it's referred to as the Wisley Lane Diversion Road. So hopefully you can all see my mouse. That goes up along the northwest boundary of our site, and then up and over across the A3. As we've mentioned, these works are to be determined, so we're expecting a decision from Secretary of State January next year. But as Camilla Lee have mentioned, we at Taylor Wimpey have submitted our roundabout and stub road application, and the reason for that, as we've explained, is we have worked back from Highways England's proposed programme, and thus we want to ensure that by the time Highways England get to this area here, a roundabout can be constructed once, and thus mitigate the need to dig up this road later on. Hopefully that's answered your question, Roy, but I do believe Highways England have documents on their website should you wish to see more about the proposals. Could I have the next question, please? So there's a question here about hedgehogs are at risk of extinction in the UK, mainly due to increased development of rural areas preventing free movement of hedgehogs and the destruction of their natural habitat. Are Taylor Wimpey working with the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, to ensure sufficient natural habitats are maintained in the Wisley plan, the inclusion of hedgehog highways? So Becky, did you want to pick up this question, if that's okay?
Yeah, thanks, Antonis, and thanks for the question. I was really pleased to see that question, actually, and to see someone who's concerned about hedgehogs. So, I mean, habitat connectivity is key for many species on site, including hedgehogs. So, as I said in my presentation, we've got great crested newt, badgers, reptiles, and other things which require habitat connectivity to thrive. Hedgehogs are species of principal importance listed in Section 41 of the NERC Act, so the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act. So we're fully intending to take account of the hedgehogs and development guidance that's produced by the People's Trust for Endangered Species and the British Hedgehog Preservation Society as part of site design. And I think some of the key things are going to be to create varied semi-natural habitats that are connected to the wider landscape, including key features that support whole life cycle requirements, as I mentioned again in my presentation. So insofar as hedgehogs are concerned, that's things like incorporating lots of areas of scrub, log and brush piles, and also things like hedgehog houses to support hibernation, including a variety of different lengths of grasses, so short grass and long grass for foraging, and then also to include things like gaps in garden fences to create hedgehog highways and ensure connectivity through the built realm, and things like having regular drop curbs, again, which are things which are going to be needed for things like great crested newts. And we're also going to ensure that hedgehogs are considered during site clearance.
Oh, thank you, Becky, and thank you again for that question. There's a question here. Your theories are predicated on style change. Martin, is that okay if you wanted to ask that answer? That's okay.
Yeah, sorry, struggling to find.
That's
my,
okay, Martin.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if we forward wind 10 years and assuming planning permission has been acquired and the development is going ahead, you know, in 2030, according to the announcements just this week, the sale of petrol cars and new diesel cars will be banned. I think there's going to have to be a national conversation about how road user pricing moves forward with the loss of current taxation on vehicles. So I suspect there's going to be some sort of road user charging in place. I think e-bikes will have taken off very much, and we're already seeing the impact of COVID is leading to lots of office-based workers feeling now that they don't need to be in the office 5 days a week, and there will be a substantial proportion of people working from home more regularly. So I think actually the lifestyle stuff is going to change quite considerably over the next decade, and it's really important on that basis to really plan for and try to provide the infrastructure that will enable people to cycle and to use other modes of transport as their day-to-day default modes. Does that answer what you were asking?
Yeah, sorry, Martin. I love you, my net or yours. So apologies for that. Hopefully, but thank you for answering that question. Ellie, there's a further question. So, what in the winter cycling plan? People only want to cycle on nice days and don't like arriving at work drenched. The roads are overburdened, legless at the weekend. This, of course, without your bus running up and down narrow roads. So that's a question from Catherine. To answer if that's okay.
Sorry, Anthony, your mic, your audio dipped out a little bit. Were you asking me to answer that?
Yeah, yourself or Colin. Sorry, did you get that question?
It was about rainy days, was it?
Yeah. So what happens in the winter with your cycling plan? People nice days and don't like arriving at work drenched. So over leisure cyclists at the weekend. This, of course, without your buses narrow roads. So that was the question.
Okay. Well, I'll start, and then if anybody's got anything else to add, I mean, I think from the behavioural point of view, if people are got into the habit of walking and cycling as their default modes. We find in many studies across the country that people are quite resilient, and actually I think the sort of the threat of bad weather, particularly rain, is often overstated. If you're doing a 10 to 15 minute cycle to school or a cycle commute to one of the railway stations, etc., actually in that 15-minute slot in the morning, the number of days you're going to get drenched is actually quite rare. It's certainly true that we would anticipate that cycling levels would decrease in the winter, but of course we've got the bus service as well on the particularly bad weather days, connecting to things like the local stations for train commuters. And if as I mentioned, we can find a mechanism of a subscription service whereby we're giving people discounted bike loans, car club use, discounted bus fares, etc., that can really grow people's loyalty to using a suite of modes according to their particular needs and the particular weather conditions. I think in relation to that separate point about some of the roads being overrun with leisure cyclists at weekend, it'd be really interesting for me actually to understand a little bit more about whether there are specific links that are particularly pressured with cyclists, and whether there's a degree to which some of the routes can be pointed more towards cyclists and some of the routes more towards general traffic, so that as we continue to develop our cycle route proposals, we can bear that in mind and make sure that we're coming into line with what the other users of the roads are.
Thank you, Martin. Mindful for time, if we could, the last is from Claire. I am part of a small team from All Saints Ockham who were present of a pioneer minister site. What can Taylor Wimpey do to assist, please? So probably a question for Mark Patchett, and then I can finish off if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Antonis. Well, there's a whole number of things here. So it's interesting, actually, links to another question that I think someone else put up. I think Catherine wrote about potentially the church being overrun. I think, first of all, if the church was overrun, I think Reverend Hugh Greer and the diocese would be really thrilled. But I think in practice, the real issue is, I think, actually how we enable stuff to take place on site. So an important question, and certainly the approach will be that Taylor Wimpey, through the trust, will work very closely with the local parish church and the diocese to enable that to happen. We've got some good examples we can draw on. I've recently run a project myself. There's one you might look up at Stonegrove, where actually the pioneer minister was co-located alongside the trust in the community centre, and worked very closely with the trust and with the people throughout. And that's on particularly around the placemaking and helping people with both their mental welfare, spiritual welfare. But the other key point to note, of course, is the church also has some statutory functions required. Some of you might know the term, it's hatch, match and dispatch, or baptisms, weddings and funerals. And those can obviously either take place in the parish church, or it may be that we look at, in partnership with the diocese, to license some facility within the development. But what I want to say is that we'd be very keen to work with any pioneer minister and enable that to work in practical ways around the placemaking stuff, as well as practical use of the buildings.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the team for answering those questions. I do appreciate there was a lot of questions submitted today, so thank you very much for those. As I've mentioned, as part of our next steps, we will take all of your questions that were kindly submitted today, and we are committed to answering all those questions by Friday, the 27th of November. So apologies we weren't able to get through them all today, but hopefully you were all happy with the answers put forward from the team, but please do let us know if you would like more clarity. So next steps then, the Q&A document will be uploaded onto our website, which is www.wisleyairfield.com. A feedback form will be circulated on Monday where we would kindly request you to fill out that form, if that's okay. So please do let us know on some of the ideas. Please do provide comment. We would really appreciate that. We will have the second design review panel in December, so next month, before coming back to the community early next year for our third community consultation event. But please do note that these events aren't the only ways you can provide us with feedback. Please do email us directors, do speak to representatives of the community liaison group as they feed in on the plans or on the emerging plans. So there's lots of opportunities to give us that feedback. And then finally, our intention is to submit our outline application in the second quarter of 2021. So let us know what you think. Please do look out for those feedback forms. Sign up to our newsletters if you're not receiving those at the moment, and please do attend future events. But thank you very much for attending this morning, and thank you to the team for presenting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.